Ooh, good morning. So this is kind of whack. I'm doing my first video in my road, but I just have got to do it. I can't. I've been putting it off, I think, and putting it off and putting it off, and I just can't put it off any longer. So this is the first video in, I think of my body of work, World Arts Center for Healing and Transformation. So my name is Nana Ajewa Anine, and I am, there's a lot of things I guess I want to say about myself, but right now what I really want to say is that I struggle with depression. And that's really the reason, that's the impetus for me doing this series of videos. And if I think about it, it's been the impetus for me doing a lot of things, my full body of work. So I'm a cultural artist, and have been for a very, very long time, and a healer. I'm an Akan priest. The Akan are out of Ghana, West Africa. And so I'm an African traditionalist, and a lot of what I've been doing is focusing on, I guess, the things that oppression, the effects of oppression, the far-reaching effects of oppression, whether it is racist oppression, sexist oppression, economic oppression, all of those different things that I come across personally, and how I deal with that. What has happened, I think, is I've always been really sensitive, always been sensitive to the injustices around me. So I was born in 1962, and the civil rights movement was, I think, raging around that time. And I remember being really young and seeing, I'm from DC, but seeing the March on Washington, and my grandparents and my mother being tuned into the activism and the turmoil of that time. And of course, we were subject to a lot of those same injustices. So I'm here, and what I'm planning to do is just talk about that. Talk about the experiences that I had in it, the effects that those experiences had on me. I guess, yeah. And how they have contributed to my depression, and how I've dealt with it, how I've handled it over time, and like that. So early on, I remember, they have something they call ACEs, which are, I gotta get the term. It's events that are traumatic in a person's life. And the more a person has of them when they're young, matter of fact, I probably should put a video, attach a video to this about childhood trauma. There was a sister that did a TED Talk about it. And that the reason a lot of people don't talk about childhood trauma is because, or I guess the reason it's not a thing in mainstream America, is because it's so common, really. It's not those people over there. It's not limited to my community, to the community of women, the community of indigenous people, or lower class, working class, people. It's not limited to that. It's pervasive. And so, but, just to talk about it some, early on, in my childhood years, I experienced watching, the horrors of racism on TV, and people getting beaten in the streets, and you know, I remember really wanting to go to the march on Washington, but I was really young, like 3. And I just remember my mother saying, "I'm not taking my baby down there." So I come from a family of people who were pretty politically active. It's kind of hard not to be because you're constantly having to fight for your rights. So I remember my mother she worked for the government. Most people from D.C. Who grow up in D.C., I guess that's a thing, to work in the government. That's a good job, solid job. And so she was no different. So, so she did that. But, they tried to limit her pay. So she had what they call equal employment opportunity meetings in our living room. So that was committees that the African American workers formed, and so she was, I guess, the chairperson of. I don't know. That's what I kind of remember in my mind, but I remember those meetings at our house. So I remember, I guess, fast forward to some of the trauma that I experienced coming up. I went to 12 different schools by the time I graduated high school. And some of that was an effort on my mother's part to make sure I went to a good school. So, early on, I think I was 5, I was diagnosed as gifted. And that's what made me eligible for the opportunity to get a scholarship. I think it was called the ABC Scholarship. And I went to private school after that. So not to tell that story right now, I'm kind of giving an overview. I hated it though. I went to private school. It's a predominantly white school. A lot of the schools I went to were predominantly white. And I had problems with racism in those settings in some instances. I would say in the private school when I was 7 and 8, what made me feel particularly, I don't know, I didn't like being there. One, there was no culture in the environment. It was like a really sterile environment. I don't know, it wasn't particularly interesting. It was predominantly white. There were a couple of black people in there, and I think I found a couple of friends. But in general, the cultural difference just seemed stark to me and a little uncomfortable. But here's the thing. At my house, everything was, there were all these issues. The issues of the day that we were having to deal with, the injustices that we were fighting against and talking about. And when I got to school, there was none of that. Nobody was saying anything about it. It was like nothing was happening. And, Martin Luther King is getting killed and nobody's saying anything. So it just was, like being in a world that didn't have anything to do with my world. And I think I resented that. And so after I was in there 2nd grade, I was in 3rd grade, and after 3rd grade, I told my mother I didn't want to go back. So, so I remember leaving that school, and I went to a school called Amadon. I didn't go there first. I'm trying to remember. I think something happened. Oh, I know what happened. I went to visit my father for the summer. My mother and my father divorced when I was 2. And he moved to Ohio. My father was a lawyer. And he would come to visit in the summertime. He would come, which my birthday was in the summertime. So he would come visit for my birthday. And he would come, I think, for Christmas. Every year he would come, though, just twice a year and visit me. And I miss my father so much. And what I'll say is, I think that's the first time that I would say I felt depressed is one time he came to visit and he left, and I remember crying so hard and feeling so, I just missed him so much. I could feel it in my stomach, like my stomach was cramping, and I cried so hard I just started throwing up in the bathroom. And nobody was around. My mother was at work. My sister was there, but my older sister was never particularly attentive to me. She wasn't really affectionate. She wasn't really, she seemed like she didn't like me. Like she kind of didn't want me around most of the time. But, so I just remember that feeling, you know. That was the first time. Fast forward to when I was 11 and, well, no, I went to visit my father that summer. I don't know if it was that summer, but the summer after third grade, so I was 8. Went to visit. My mother was reluctant to let me go up until that time, but this time she let me go visit him for the summer. And my father talked shit about my mother to the point that, you know, he told me things like my mother's family was backwards and they couldn't raise me right. And, you know, he told me weird stuff like things she used to do, how she used to cook and she didn't have clothes on, or, you know, just, but now what I understand that is parental alienation. Because by the end of the summer, when it was time for me to go home, he had me write her a letter letting her know that I didn't want to come home. I wanted to be there with him. And the reasons that I didn't want to come home, because her family was backwards and mixed up. And, you know, I wrote these things to my mother because of what my father was telling me. And so I didn't go back that summer. I mean, at the end of the summer, I stayed in Ohio and went to school. I was in the 4th grade. And, but halfway through the year, I really got homesick. I missed my mother. I wanted to go home. And he let me go home. So I moved back to DC, went to yet another school. That school was called Amadon Elementary School. And I remember I got jumped at that school. And I remember who was the culprit of it. I'll never forget, the guy's name was Jonathan Rice. I don't know what his problem was. But, you know, at that age, probably he liked me. You know how little boys are, they like you, and the way that they show they like you is that they pick on you. Well, I'm not interested in being picked on, never have been. But I think he like, you know, kind of instigated this whole thing where I ended up getting jumped on the playground. And I remember of all those people, I made sure I got his ass. Okay, I took a couple of them down with me. I didn't go down by myself. But I remember I made sure I got him because I knew while he was back there in the background like it was everybody else and he wasn't the main one, I knew he was the main one. And I made sure I got his ass. So anyway, that was traumatic. Then I finished out the school year there. But what happened was that summer, teachers in DC went on strike. And so my mother decided, you know, she didn't want me to miss school. And so she sent me back down with my father. When I went to stay with my father that second time, what was really traumatic about it was, you know, it's different when you go from one parent's house to the other parent's house and they don't have the same rules. And my father was not really patient with me learning what his rules were. Long story short, he told me if I made one more mistake, he got this pipe, and it was like a 6-foot lead pipe. And he was like, see that lead pipe over there? You make one more mistake, I'm gonna hit you in your head with this lead pipe. Scared the bejesus out of me. Did I say traumatic? Traumatic, we can go ahead and say that was traumatic. It completely changed just how I moved. I remember just kind of retreating to my bedroom. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I didn't want to do the wrong thing. So I just stayed to myself and didn't say much of anything. Or, you know, I just came out and did whatever I had to do. but which was eat dinner, most part. And other than that, I was in my room. Um, and so my mother got married that summer. She was due to get married. She met this guy in Colorado where she had been traveling, and they were talking about getting married. So that Christmas, she wanted me to meet the man. So she flew me out to Colorado. So it was me, my sister, and her and this guy. And I remember when I was there begging my mother, please do not send me home. I went back to my father. Please take me home with you. And she didn't do that. She sent me back to him because that was their agreement. That was one good thing. One thing about my mother and my father, they seemed to be good at co-parenting. I don't know. I mean, him talking shit about her, that's not good at co-parenting, because that effort at alienating your child from their parent is not really good co-parenting. But, anyway, she sent me back. And eventually she came to visit and talk to my stepmother about what was happening. And my stepmother was like, yeah, this probably isn't the best place for her, because the man was about to break my spirit. And it was, I've always been artistically inclined and interested in dance and acting. Acting was my first love. And he just was, had no holler for that at all. He would put me down for what all white folks want to see us do is sing and dance. I mean, what that got to do with me? I'm just saying. But so, he was wanting me to, he just thought I was really smart and I needed to be interested in doing something else. So he wasn't really supportive. Anyway, fast forward, I did go back to my mother, thank God. But let's see, 5th grade, I finished. Actually, by that time, my mother had moved. So this next school I went to was called Bunker Hill Elementary School. She was on her way to Colorado. She got married. I was there for the wedding. And after the wedding, my sister and I stayed with my aunt because my mother left and moved to Colorado, but wanted to work and get everything set up before she brought us out there. So we stayed with my aunt, Bunny, who was mean. But my grandmother, also stayed at the house with us. And my grandmother she took care of me for a lot of my life. But she tried to make, she was color struck. I guess it was common in that day, coming out of the church, and the images in the church. You got the white Jesus, and then the whole, you're a sinner because you were born, and you ain't close to Jesus because you black, which I guess means you're a sinner. I don't know if everybody's a sinner, but anyway, I think it was you're a sinner because you were born. But the people who were darker skinned were more sinners, I guess, than the lighter skinned people. Anyway, she tried to make me and my cousin Joyce the black sheep of the family. She was the matriarch of the family. So I was cognizant of that. I could tell, see that dynamic going on. So let me see. So I'm in 5th grade, Bunker Hill Elementary School, at my aunt's house. My grandmother taking care of us. Then we moved to Colorado. I was in 6th grade in whatever that school was in Thornton, Colorado, completely white. I think I was the only black person in the whole 6th grade. And I remember this little boy who kept trying to confront me. He was racist. And I remember one day we were in the hallway, and I think he figured we were out there by ourselves and he was going to corner me, and he thought he was going to beat me up in the hallway. And it didn't go how he expected. I don't know. I remember taking him and throwing his ass into the wall. And he was like telling me that a black man shot his grandfather, I think it was. killed his grandfather. And I was like, well, you know what? You keep fucking with me, somebody black gonna kill you too. And it was just, I mean, I wasn't doing anything to him. I was minding my business, So that was a little traumatic. So the next thing that was traumatic was in the house with my mother and my stepfather. First, I wasn't really feeling my stepfather. And so you could see it in my attitude. And at some point, my mother was like, stop it with the attitude. Okay. And I was like, okay. So I, tried to treat him like I was with my father, being more affectionate and more, And then she kind of flipped and was like, don't sit in his lap. Stop. Whatever it was like, I didn't get it. I was confused because first she was like, stop with the attitude and, I'm thinking, okay, I get it. You're trying to make a family. You want me to be, cooperate. And, but then she was like, and don't go anywhere with him. And I was like, what is happening? Come to find out, the relationship had turned abusive. I could feel the tension in the house, like you could feel the tension, and it was like a rise and fall. It wasn't consistent, but you could feel it building, and then things seem like they would even out, and I don't know. Anyway, one day, I came home and he tried to kill my mother. Matter of fact, I did a whole piece about that. I'm an artist and an actress. I'm a writer. So I wrote this piece. What was that piece called? I can't remember what it was called. But it was about what happened that day. How, me and my sister were going to visit a friend of hers. And on the way there, I just remember starting to feel depressed. She probably just wanted to leave because of the tension in the house. So I went back to the house, and I remember banging on the door. The cars were in the driveway, but nobody was answering the door. And so I remember going around to the side window where their bedroom was, and I heard this gargling sound. So I was like, oh, they're there. It sounds like somebody's in the bedroom. And that kind of pissed me off. So I went back to the door, and I'm banging and kicking, and, just finally my stepfather comes to the door. And I'm really cognizant about my attitude, do not show anger. And so I just said, where's Mom? And he said, she's upstairs. So I came in the house. I didn't go upstairs, but the next day when I saw her, she was swollen, and I was like, what happened to you? Like her face was swollen, and he wasn't in the house at the time, and that's when she pulled out this shirt. The shirt was bloody and this mangled hanger, and she was telling us that he tried to kill her. When I came that day, I came there at just the right time. I saved her life because he was trying to kill her. So that gargling noise I was hearing, that was him stuffing the shirt down her throat, trying to kill her. He was trying to stuff the shirt down her throat while he strangled her with the hanger. And it's just traumatic. But she was like, she didn't know when, but we were leaving, soon, for good. And so she told us, just act like everything was normal, and, so apparently no attitudes, no none of that. So we did. And, we kind of stole away. I remember we stayed with a friend of hers, and I remember all of what she was going through to make sure she was covered, that the police knew she was traveling, because we drove from Colorado back to D.C. She and my sister, I think by that time my sister was maybe 16. And so she had just gotten her driver's license. So it was a 3-day drive from Colorado back to D.C. So we got to D.C. So this next year, I'm in the 7th grade. So now I'm at, actually, that school's not that far from where I am. It's called, Alice Deal Junior High School. That's the school I went to in 7th grade. That was the first time I really had a lot of friends. And You know, that was a pleasant experience. My mother was going through it though because she was back in DC. She couldn't find work. We were staying with my grandparents, and I remember she just was depressed, trying to get it together. And, you know, what happened was she found a job in New Jersey. She ended up like looking for work not just in DC but other places. She found no. She found work in New York City. That's where she found work. But and my sister graduated high school that year. My mother had a job in New York, so my sister was going to college. My mother was moving to New York, but we were moving to New York. No, she was working in New York and she moved us to New Jersey because she didn't want to move me to New York City. Okay, so we're in New Jersey, and she's commuting to New York. Now, my sister is gone. It's just me and my mother, and I'm basically an only child now. So, small trauma, adjustment. And so I went to Linwood Middle School that year, and I was in the 8th grade. And I remember we had this race thing. There weren't that many black children at that school, but just remember this one day. I don't remember how it got started, but I remember us being on the playground, and there was maybe six of us that were black, and all these white children around us, you know, like they were gonna fight us, and we were ready. I know I was ready. I just was, you know, I just was. It just was, you know, one. That was my temperament. Like I won't start a fight, but I'm not going to be picked on, and I'm all for kicking ass. And you know, growing up through that time, you know, seeing so much injustice, seeing white people want to just attack you, you know, because they're so hateful. So when, you know, we were ready. I don't think, I'm not sure if we actually fought. I don't remember actually fighting. I don't know. Because if anybody had got hit, I would have been all over it. So, no. I guess the administration came out there and broke it up. But I do remember one time I was walking home, and I remember this little white boy who had approached me. You know, same thing during school hours. I don't remember the details of it. But I remember this particular day, I was on my way home, and he got his big brother. And I remember I was on my way home, and they're across the street yelling at me, calling me, I guess they was calling me a nigga. I don't really remember. But I remember what I told them is, bring your ass over here, and I'll kick both of y'all's asses right now. You know, I'm not with that. You gonna be chasing me. I'm not running nowhere. You ain't gonna be chasing me down, all that kind of shit. No. If you bringing it, we doing it right here. We doing it right now. So they turned around and went and left. You know, just cowards. You know, how cowardice is that? First of all, you a guy, but you gonna approach a girl because you think you could beat her up. But apparently you don't think you can beat her up, which is why you ain't got your big brother, because you think at least both of y'all can beat her up. How cowardice is that? Yeah, but anyway, traumatic. I don't know. I mean, I remember it. I'm thinking. I'm just talking about ACEs right now. So anyway. So that's when I was 13. When I was 14, I remember my mother, we started having problems. Like, I think the problem, you know, some of us, I'm a teenager, so things are changing. I was 15, and I remember, I guess without going into too much detail, I had a boyfriend. And she didn't approve of that. And she wanted to send me to live with my father. And I ran away from home because I was not going to be subjected to my father. No. Not only no, hell no. So I remember her coming to me and saying that she had found this letter that I wrote. And in that letter, I was saying that I was depressed. And that the reason that I was depressed was because of the things that my father said to me about my mother. And really interesting because, he said those things when I was maybe 8, no, 6. I think the first time I went to stay with him, I was 8 and 10, I think, when I was with him. And altogether, I didn't stay with my father more than a year and a half. But, it had an effect on me. So anyway, just, making a note of that parental alienation, the things that, parents do. I don't think they think that they're hurting their children, but you are. You are absolutely hurting your children when you are talking about their other parent in a negative way, because what I remember is it made me feel a way about myself. My mother is, she is me. You know what I'm saying? It's like when you're that age, and so you're saying these negative things about her, and so it made me feel a way about myself. A negative way about myself. So, I know parents do it in anger. It's a narcissistic kind of thing to do. Sometimes people are, they want the upper hand on the situation, and so that's how they go about doing it. But, it's never, the flip side of that is how they treat that child. Like, he was abusive to me. So not only was his language abusive toward her, he was also abusive to me. And that tends to be what that dynamic is. I just learned that recently because I continued to started to study narcissism and parental alienation because I experienced that myself in my life. So, ACEs, I'm on ACEs. So I'm just up to 14, age 14. Age 15, I had a boyfriend. My mother didn't approve of it. She was talking about sending me back to my father. I ran away from home a few times, actually. And we finally, there was that boyfriend and there was another boyfriend, and she was like, I'm going to take my daughter from here. Because the second boyfriend, we were talking about getting married, and she was like, no. I remember we were talking about getting married. He was the star of the basketball team and had gotten a basketball scholarship to college. So he wanted to marry me and for us to move to where he was, where he was going to college. And my mother was like, no. And we moved. Moved back to DC. She moved me back to DC. And before that happened, this man, he lived downstairs because she left me by myself for about a couple of weeks, just in between. She trusted me to, go to school, and she had everything set up. All I had to do, I think I was finishing school, and then I was going to come to D.C. But ended up hooking up with this guy that lived downstairs. I remember he was 27 years old. I was 16 at the time, and had sex with this guy, and it just was like, I don't know if that counts as trauma. It just occurred to me. That was statutory rape. But anyway, let's see. Came to DC, so I'm 16. And I had yet another boyfriend. I think I was 16, maybe 16. Oh, joy. So when I came back to DC, okay, so that's another school. So while I was in New Jersey, there was Linwood Middle School, and then from there I went to North Brunswick High School. So that was 2 schools I went to there. I'm mentioning the schools because in the context of ACEs, they talk about like those kinds of life change, things you don't have any control over, but they're major life changes, like, changing schools, moving to a new city, all of these things were happening while, so that's why I'm mentioning all of those things. And then, so let me see, I had this boyfriend. Um, I don't know. I'm just gonna fast forward to the end of that relation. I don't even know if I want to talk about that relationship. Um, in terms of ACEs or the next traumas that I want to talk about, I will talk. Well, so in terms of depression, okay. So that boyfriend broke up with me, and then I remember hitting this depression that was I never experienced that before. First, when we moved back to DC, I was going to the school called School Without Walls. That's where all my friends from 7th grade were going. Um, um, okay, that was cool. But I was staying, my mother was living in Maryland. I was living in DC with my grandmother. And I stayed between her house and one of my cousin's houses. And anyway, I'm trying to think, what am I trying to say about that? This guy all I want to talk about is when he broke up with me and I went into this deep depression. I think what happened was my mother found out I was I would spend the night over his house sometimes, and that's when she moved me to Maryland, and she wanted me, and so I ended up going to school out there. So there's another change in schools. I hated that school. It too was predominantly white, and by this time the black people that were in the school had a lifetime of going to predominantly white schools, and so their whole demeanor and way of being was just a little different. You can definitely tell the difference between children who have grown up in predominantly black environments and black children who've grown up in predominantly white environments. So there's that same, I think, disconnect between kind of what's happening in our world and because I guess this is what people don't say or don't acknowledge or don't understand is that when you're in a predominantly white environment and you're like the only black person, you just can be disconnected. So when I had that experience when we lived in Colorado and I was in 6th grade, I'm the only black child in the 6th grade. I remember a time when I went home and I looked in the mirror and was surprised that I was black. I was shocked because all I saw around me was whiteness. Everything was white. It snowed all the damn time. The house was white. All the people were white. I hated it. But that was the experience. So when I went to this, when she brought me out to Columbia, Maryland, to this school, like I couldn't even see black people that I wanted to be friends with, So also in that environment, you're just disconnected, So that's kind of what it is. All right, so, but I went to that school, and when he broke up with me, I was so depressed, I dropped out of school. I remember I dropped out of school. I was sleeping all the time. I vaguely remembered, I think my mother must have told me I was gonna have to work. I don't know. But I remember I was just depressed. I was just depressed. I was like knocked out of the park depressed. That was the first time that I experienced that. And sometimes I think to myself, I was living with my mother, and my mother is not into like, you're not going to school or, that's not my family. My family is you gonna work or go to school, that's what it is. But I couldn't pull it together. But, but she didn't bother me. I don't remember her bothering me about that. It took me about 3 months, but I remember going to New Jersey. She was going to New Jersey for a visit, and I remember talking to my ex-boyfriend, the one that wanted to marry me and all of that. He had been an A student in school, and he valued education. So I remember talking to him, And I was like, well, I didn't think I was going to go back to school. I was like, maybe I'll just get my GED. And I remember him talking to me and was like, go back to school. Go back to school, get your high school diploma. Do not get a GED. And I listened to him and I went back to school. I went back to School Without Walls. I didn't go to that predominantly white school in Columbia. I don't even remember what the name of that high school was. But I went back to School Without Walls. Come to find out, I only really needed another, I think, 2.5 credits to graduate. And so I think I went to Spingarn Stay. So School Without Walls is the kind of school where they'll send you to different places for classes. And so I love that school for that. So like, for example, the concept of the school is that education doesn't only happen inside of 4 walls. So for example, I had a zoology class and I took it at the zoo. I loved the independence being at that school. Nobody was like looking over your shoulder all the time. You took some of your classes in the school building, other classes you would go to different places and take them. So I ended up going to Spingarn Stay, or Spingarn High School, because they had this state program called Stay. And so it was for people like me who only needed a couple of credits to graduate. So I took a couple of classes there. And yeah, so I think, am I through my, no, I'm not through my childhood yet. Okay, so let's keep going. So when I was 17, between the ages of 17 and 18, I was molested 3 times, on 3 different occasions. There was, my father died when I was 17, traumatic, and I went to his funeral. I never met his side of the family, but I met some of my cousins there, and my mother had always been really protective of me. She wouldn't like leave me with people, but this time she let her guard down, and one of my cousins was saying, they wanted me to spend a little more time with them. She wasn't planning to stay for I don't know what it was. I think she was there for the wake. She wasn't planning to stay for the funeral, and I don't know what happened after that, but she was willing to leave me there because my cousin said, listen, I'll get her home, let her spend a little more time with us, let her get to know her father's side of the family. And my mother said, okay. So I was only there like another day or 2 maybe. So my cousin, we drove. He was in the military. My father was from Mississippi, so that's where all of this was happening. But my cousin was in the military and stationed in Atlanta. So he drove me to Atlanta, and then I was going to catch the plane from Atlanta back to D.C. But when we got to Atlanta, he stayed in the military barracks, and so I stayed in the room with him, and he raped me twice that night. Traumatic. So I went home, I just remember just being frozen and scared. And because he didn't say anything, he just rolled over and started having sex with me. And I'm like, okay, but I'm in like in a strange place. I can't leave. I don't know where I'm going. I'm dependent on him to get me home. And so I just was in a really vulnerable position and just didn't say anything. I froze, and it happened that night, and then it happened again that morning before we got up, and went on like, I got up, we got dressed and left. Traumatic. So the next time it happened, I was, it was a friend of mine, or he wasn't really a friend. I was friends with a friend of his. And when me and my friend were hanging out, because they were friends, sometimes it would end up being the 3 of us. I could tell he liked me, he kind of had a crush on me, but I didn't like him. And my friend probably had a crush on me too, but we ain't had that kind of relationship. So anyway, what happened one day, he came and picked me up. No, I don't know how I ran into him. Anyway, we ended up going to the park and went to, he was like, well, we'll go with me and we're going to sit and we're going to puff. Okay. So we did that, and then it was time for, just hanging out, talking. Maybe had a beer or something. I don't remember the details of that. I was smoking cigarettes during that time. So we're just chilling, and we leave, and I'm expecting him to take me home, but he just drives past my grandmother's house, which is where I was staying at the time. And my grandmother was so strict about me. I needed to be in by curfew, all of this. And I was already running late, and he just drives past. And I was like, wait. He drives me to the other side of town. And he's telling me he wants me to go in the house. And I'm like, I don't want to go. No, take me home. Anyway, he goes on and he drags me out of the car. And I'm like, he's like, just go hang with me for a little minute. I'll take you home. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, again, it's nighttime in D.C. I'm not getting ready to be out here by myself going nowhere. So I stay with him. And long story short, we're at his uncle's house. So we talk to his uncle for a little while. His uncle leaves. And so he's like, well, let's go upstairs. And, I don't remember the details, but I do remember he kept trying to convince me to have sex with him. And he's like, just have sex with me and I'll take you home. Finally, I did it, and he took me home. Now, I didn't know that was considered to be rape until years later. Somebody said, when you're coerced into having sex, you've said no several times, but the person coerces you into doing it, that's also rape. Well, anyway, so there was that. Traumatic. The other time it happened was, by this time I've graduated from high school, and I started going to college. My plan, I wasn't really planning on going to college. I was just going to go to school for cosmetology, and that was my plan. I didn't really have any interest in college, but when I was at Spingarn State, by this time I really started applying myself in school. One thing about that second boyfriend, he was a really good influence in terms of education, because that's when I actually started applying myself in school. Before then, I was like getting C's. I might get a D every now and again, or a B, but I wasn't really paying attention to school. I was kind of like learning through osmosis. I was just there, and my father had been so strict on me around school, and it just was like his love was conditional. If I wasn't doing well in school, he didn't love me and he was going to kick my ass. So I remember when I went back to my mom, saying that to her, like, are you going to love me if I don't get good grades? Because having been diagnosed as gifted, the expectations of me were really high. And she was like, I love you regardless, yes, I love you. And so I didn't really pay a lot of attention to school until 11th grade, when I had that boyfriend, and he was a really good student, and that's when I started to apply myself. So that's when I started getting A's and B's in school. So when I was at Spingarn State, my last year, I'm in 12th grade, and I remember it was a science teacher, and he was talking about, so what are y'all going to do after this? Are you going to college? And then I was like, no, I'm going to school for cosmetology. And I remember him telling me, I think you should go to college. I think you would really like it. And I was like, what? No, I'm not doing that. I remember my sister went to college. She was taking the SATs and going through all of this drama about tuition and putting in applications for loans. And it was putting my mother through, my mother had to pay part of it. And it just was a lot, and I just wasn't even interested in all that. I just wanted to, get a skill and make my own money and go on about my business. But he was like, well, you can go to UDC. University of District of Columbia. You don't have to go through all of that. They do have a test that you take, an admissions test where they, but just take a couple of classes, try it. If you don't like it, you can always stop. And so that's what made me try it. The fact that, he was like, you could always stop, but I think you'll really like it. Try it. So I tried it. I went and I was admitted. I got tested. I apparently tested really high. They put me in the honors program. And I remember I had an honors class, and in that class we had to collaborate. They paired. It was an English class. I always loved English. That was my favorite subject in school, and so they paired me with the sister, and so she and I would work on projects together. But we still live in life. I'll go over her house, but she might have this errand to run. I'll go with her. And anyway, this one particular time, she went to a friend of hers' house. Now, little did I know, she smoked PCP. Matter of fact, I don't know. I know she smoked PCP. I think later on I found out that that was a problem for her. But so anyway, we go over there, and I'm really just waiting for her. I'm just with her. I'm not over there to do anything in particular. I'm just with her because we're supposed to be studying together. And so in the meantime, she's like, well, go with me. I got to go. I'm going over here. So we go over to Sky's house, and it's late, and it's dark when we get there, and it gets later and later. And eventually she was like, yeah, well, I'm going to stay over. I'm going to spend the night. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have a car at this time, so I can't get in my car and go somewhere else. I'm not getting ready to walk the streets of DC. I wasn't that far from my grandmother's house. I might have been able to go over there. Was my grandmother still living at that time? I'm not sure. Anyway, long story short, so I'm there. They put me in a room, and then, him and her are sleeping where they're sleeping. So, okay, so we're going to be there, and I guess she and I are going to get up in the morning, and then we're going to go to a library and do the work that we need to do. In the middle of the night, some guy comes into the room and just starts having sex with me. Now, I started to resist, but I could tell from his response to my resistance that he wasn't going to take no for an answer. So that was the third time. But this time I'm 18. So I think I've kind of gone through the ACEs for my childhood, and so yeah. I mean, I guess I could childhood ends at 18. I think I could go up to 21. I can go up to 20 because I had a whole bunch more trauma between then and 21. I think I was in school. Let's just go up to 21. I was in, so I'm in the honors program at UDC. Working and going, no, I wasn't working and going to school. First, I was getting Social Security. Oh, I don't want to go into those details. All right, let's just, I don't want to go. I just don't. It's painful. What I want to talk about is I was 19 and I met my ex-husband there. I just remember we were so in love. I'm gonna cut it real short. We got married. No, we didn't get married that soon. But we were together. I got pregnant. We were so in love and wanted to have a baby together. We prayed to get pregnant and all that stuff. Finally got pregnant. I'm 20 years old when I get pregnant. And I don't know, I got put out of the house somewhere in the midst of that, out of my mother's side. Oh! So I didn't talk about that part. I don't know how to skip all of that. Okay, so now we got to rewind and go back. Go back to 18. So after all of that, I remember I started, after being molested those times, I remember my perspective on men changed. I thought that all they really wanted from me was sex. And a lot of other stuff happened. I just don't want to go into it. I just want us to go right here to this perspective that I had, that's what they really wanted from me. And at some point, I decided that so I was kind of backing off of my relationships with men. And I remember the next people that I met started doing this thing, talking about they wanted to marry me and all that kind of stuff. And I was over it because, yeah, I was like, stop with the game. So I was like, okay, so what I'm going to do, we can be real clear. There will be I'm not interested in that kind of a relationship. So when I have sex with people from now, they're going to have to pay me. And I went into prostitution. There's a whole bunch of details about how that came to be. I don't really want to go into all of those details because that's a really long story. It's just, it's not that it's a story I'm not willing to tell. It's just for the purposes of this particular video, which is already very, very long, because I'm really just talking about aces. So I ended up in prostitution. It was a choice. It was my own choice. Like walking the streets kind of prostitution. Now, for me, and I did that for 6 months. For me, I would describe that as depression because it was a reckless response, right? It was that reckless behavior, I identify that as depression. Okay. So then that was 18. I met, I think that was in the summer. The next, after the summer, I went back to school, and that's when I met my ex-husband. And actually I ended up getting arrested. And that's what made me stop walking the streets. Because while I was doing that, I was robbed. So you can just imagine, if you're a prostitute walking the streets, that kind of prostitution, you're going to have a few traumatic things happen. Yes, somebody tried to rob me one time, punched me in my face. I had a few different really traumatic things happen. I got arrested, and that's what actually made me stop street walking. But I still wanted to do it, but I just wasn't going to do it like that. So I was trying to figure out another way to do it. And I approached my ex-husband, who was just a friend at that time, just a really likable guy. And he was like, well, I could help you do that, but you just seem like you would make somebody a nice wife. You don't need to be doing that. And nobody, I don't know. I was, anyway. Fast forward, obviously we got married at some point. But I got pregnant, 20 years old. He started behaving differently during my pregnancy. He became jealous and possessive and, abusive. Emotionally abusive, because he started accusing me of sleeping with the guy next door, and it started getting a little crazy. After I had the baby, it got even worse. He was just like, it was all whoever, a guy walking up the street, why is he looking at you like that? What's up between y'all? He just was on and on and on with the accusations. And he got so upset one night that he just attacked me. I remember he was choking me. He took all my clothes and threw them out in the hallway. He's like, get the fuck out. Because he thought that I was messing with somebody. Who knows who? I don't even know. Because all of it was in his head, because I was never messing with anybody. But, I went to traumatic. So I left him and I remember I moved back with my mom, but my mother really didn't want me there. She didn't say that to me. I overheard her talking to my aunt and my uncle like, damn, why your children, you raise them, why they keep coming back? And I just felt it hurt my feelings, and but I also kind of felt where she was coming from because I had a child with me, and that was like a thing. My family, we don't do having babies and like teen pregnancies and then the grandma's raising the child. We don't do that in my family. So, yeah, your ass will get put out and all that. They don't play that in my family. So, but at the same time, she wasn't putting me out, but at the same time, I got it. This was my choice to have a baby, and it's my responsibility and her father's responsibility to take care of her. So I went back. And I was like, we're gonna work it out. But I wasn't really thinking work it out. What I was thinking is, let me get myself together. Let me make some money so that I can take care of me and my child. Which, almost in retrospect, kind of makes me wish that I had stuck with my first plan, which was just to go to school for cosmetology. At least I would have had a trade. By this time, I would have built up a clientele and had, been making my own money, and would have been good to just move forward. But instead, I chose to go to college. I had a year, like a year and a half of college under my belt, but and I don't have a skill, so all I could do is still, as a teenager, I used to work at fast food places. So that's the only experience I have under my belt at this point. So anyway, I went back to him, and so I was trying to get up my skills. I think I was in school. It was like an adult education program. I'm taking shorthand, typing, trying to get that together so I can get a clerical kind of job. Something that pays more money. I could actually take care of me and my daughter. And while I'm doing that, so I remember I was working and I was going to school. I got a job at McDonald's. And I shared that with him, that what I was doing was I was just, going to work and try to get my money together. He and I could co-parent, but I was, planning to move on. So what does he do? He takes my daughter to, one day when I get up and I'm on my way to work. I remember on my way to work that day, I checked my daughter. My daughter had a slight fever. And I remember telling him, well, just keep giving her water. And if she still has that fever, when I get home, I'll take her to the doctor. So I go to work, and when I get home, he's gone, she's gone. And the neighbor that he had been accusing me of having an affair with, he leaves a note on the bathroom mirror for me to go talk to that person. So I go talk to him, and the guy tells me that he went to North Carolina with my daughter, which is where he was from. So he took her to North Carolina, I guess to visit his mother. And I was like, okay. I don't have any way of getting in contact with him. At that time, we didn't have cell phones and all that kind of stuff. I don't know his mother's number or any, so I don't have any way of getting in contact with him. So I don't know what's happening with my daughter. Did her fever go down? You can't really play with babies and fevers and all that kind of thing. But, what can I do? So the weekend goes by, and he comes back on Monday, but he comes back without my daughter. So what I understood, I think at the time, I thought maybe he thought like maybe we could try to work things out between us if she wasn't around, I guess. Anyway, I had to go along with it. It was, I had to just kind of just try to be cool and go along with it. He would only call. He wouldn't give me the number, his mother's phone number. The only way I could get in contact with my daughter, find out about my daughter, was through him, which was, I guess for him, insurance that I wasn't going anywhere. But long story short, my daughter ended up getting sick because, his mother gave her, I think it was eggs, she said, and my daughter had an allergic reaction to it. And then she took her to the doctor, and, they're like, well, where are the parents? And she's like, and how do we get in contact with him? And she's like, I don't know. This is my son's child, but I don't know where he lives. I don't have a phone number to get in contact with him. He'll call eventually, and like I said, we're not calling I want to call every day, but I gotta go with what he's saying. And he's like, no, we don't need to call down there every day. She's with my mother. She's cool. So, so I don't know how many days went by before we called and finally found out. But long story short, we ended up losing custody of my daughter. She was taken into North Carolina state custody. We did negotiate that and put in foster care. Traumatic. By this time, I don't think I've turned 21. I think I was still 20. And yep, so those are my aces. But let me just continue to describe that. So I remember we came back home. Obviously, I'm shortening the story a whole bunch, but I just remember that when we came back from court, came back from North Carolina without my daughter, that was the first time, I'm gonna tell you the experience that I had. I remember sitting down and my ex-husband, he was talking to me. And sometimes I could hear him, I could see his lips moving, but I couldn't hear him. Sometimes I could hear him and sometimes I couldn't. It was like my mind was drifting in and out. And this was what I remember thinking to myself is, I wonder if this is what they mean by losing your mind. Because my mind is leaving. It's like going and it's coming back. And it's going and it's coming back. And that's when I realized that I too could lose my mind. And I think I'm gonna wrap this up there, because in terms of aces, I think that is a full accounting. That's a full accounting of it.